Hi.
Hello again. Adolph Saphir, page 242 of The Divine Unity of Scripture. In the last segment, Saphir was developing the thought that although the Bible is the book of books above all other books, yet it generates interest in so many fields of endeavor that it generates books, it generates educational literature. And he goes on so far then from granting that Scripture does not encourage the cultivation of our faculties and the zealous investigation of truth in all its different departments. We see that Scripture is the very basis upon which all activity of mind is founded, and that all books are written in order that this one book may be understood. For there is no book in the world which so encourages the use of our reason and the active employment of all the mental faculties that God has bestowed upon us. It sets a high value on knowledge, and it continually counsels us to get wisdom. As a revelation addressing itself to man, an intellectual and responsible being, it at once quickens all his powers, and wherever the Bible has been, human knowledge has made progress. Although the Bible does not interfere in any way with all those different branches of knowledge with which man is occupied, it connects itself with them all. No book in the world exhibits such a love of nature, such a diligent and careful observation of nature, as Scripture. Such is the testimony of Alexander von Humboldt, who was one of the great naturalists of the 19th century. And yet Scripture does not come into conflict or collision with any investigation or with any intellectual activity, defining exactly the limits which must be assigned to them, and reserving for itself that special place which, as a revelation from God, belongs to it. In my next lecture, when I have to speak on the miraculous character of Scripture, I shall endeavor to show that this applies especially to science, and not merely is there no collision between Scripture and science, but that without the scriptural idea of God and this world, and of this world forming one whole or cosmos, there would be no legitimate and thorough foundation upon which science could build its superstructure. Today my subject is rather with regard to history.
The Bible history is peculiar. It is a theological history. The selection of evidence and the way in which the evidences are narrated show that all the historical books were written by men of prophetic spirit. It aims at illustrating God's dealings with man. It desires to show how the salvation which is in Jesus Christ was prepared. It wishes to lay down all the threads which are to be taken up when the whole counsel of God shall be fulfilled. But although the Scripture pursues its method thus, it throws light upon history in general. What is history? There is a very natural tendency of man to write down events which strike him as remarkable. It is a natural thing for a family to keep a chronicle or a diary of things that happen and to preserve genealogies. The Egyptians could not allow anything remarkable to pass without writing down an accurate description of it. There is a chronicle style of history which we trace in most ancient nations, exceedingly tiresome, because there is constant repetition, which in the course of centuries becomes endless, dynasty succeeding dynasty, war following upon war, and the different vicissitudes and the different developments of various branches barely recorded. The Romans and the Greeks had a higher style of history. Yet, after all, the Romans and the Greeks did not teach the true method of history. For in the true method of history, it is necessary that the whole human race should be regarded as forming one family. The ancient nations had not this idea at all. They thought that, in the various countries of which they had any knowledge, the inhabitants, as it were, had sprung out of the earth, and that they were not connected with the nations of other countries, so that the Greeks looked down upon all the rest of the world as barbarians, The Romans looked down upon all the rest of the world as people to be subjugated to their empire. The true idea of history, as it lives now among us, even among people who do not know whence they have obtained that idea, is this, that humanity is a unity, and that events not merely succeed each other with constant iteration, but that there is a purpose in them. In fact, that history leads to some goal and to some end.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that it's only in the last 200 years that science has proven that we're all one species, the human race.
One source, yeah.
But the Bible anticipated that. And boy, it's very necessary to remember this today. The Bible insists that we're all of one blood. Paul preached that in Athens. And it was against the grain of the Athenians, who were the wisest people in the world, at least in their own eyes. But the Bible said it. Genesis teaches it. The whole Bible teaches it. So today we're in danger of losing this thought, aren't we? And the human race is being fragmented endlessly. So, yeah, we have to remind ourselves that the Bible insists that although we're not all of one faith, we are all of one blood, one genealogy. And also we have got this idea that it would be altogether impossible and unprofitable simply to chronicle all the events which happen to all the different nations and tribes of the earth, and that our great object is to select those nations and to select those events which stand in direct and vital connection with the whole stream of history, and which contribute something to the development of the whole race. During the last years, that is, the late Victorian era, there has appeared a history which has astonished and delighted the civilized world. The veteran historian, Ranke, has attempted to write a world history, a history of history, selecting only those nations, and in those nations only those events and movements which have contributed to the general history. But whence did Ranke and all other modern historians get that idea but from the Bible? Mark this, from the Bible, nowhere else. I had occasion to quote to you the words of a great man of science, that the beginning and the end of things are both absolutely hidden to science. Science has to do with phenomena, but the beginning of things and the end of things are both absolutely untouchable by science. The same may be said of history. And yet, unless we know the beginning of our race, the unity of our race, and that all the different nations of the world are related to one another, how is it possible for us to conceive the idea of a world history? Again, unless we have the idea of providence, of God, who sees the end from the beginning, who guides and overrules things for his own glory and for the good of humanity. It's a hopeless thing to read history. It leads to nothing. It is like a vessel that is drifting, tossed to and fro by the waves of the sea, without having someone to guide it and bring it to the appointed goal.
But thirdly, what is that end, and what is that goal? What a curious thing it is that before geography had made any great progress, the Bible anticipated that the whole earth would be inhabited, that the uttermost ends of the earth would be peopled, and that the whole earth would be united in the knowledge and worship of one God, and in righteousness and in prosperity. You remember that Moses said that when the Most High divided to the sons of Adam their inheritance, he did it according to the number of the children of Israel. And this is the very thing that the Apostle Paul preached to the Athenians, the philosophy of history. He says, God has made of one blood all the nations of the earth. Not as you imagine that you, Athenians, are of a different blood from the barbarians. Not merely has he done this, but he fixed the bounds of their habitations, as well as regulated the different periods and epochs of their history. Here you have a chronology, and here you have a geography, and here you have a teleology, which is of that purpose.
Teleology has to do with the knowledge of purpose, right?
Okay. Yeah. I'll believe you.
Okay.
Or aim that alone gives eyes to history. Okay, well, that makes sense then. Without it, history would be like a body without eyes. Is it not a wonderful thing? And as for the beginning of the human race, no inquiring mind, no lover of humanity, no enthusiastic pursuer of history can rest satisfied without asking himself the question, what was the beginning of the human race? All things in both physiology and etymology? No,
Etymology?
ethnology?
Ethnology?
Ethnology, as well as in all the sciences which bear upon the subject, confirm the idea of the unity of the human race, and also that all human language was originally one. Max Muller has often asserted that the more languages are examined, notwithstanding all their diversity, the more it is seen that they consist of a very few elementary roots, and they must all have originated in one common source. And as another, philology? Is that how you say it?
Philologer?
Oh, philologer. Okay, I said that totally
I think today
wrong.
you'd say philologist.
Okay. Okay, as another philologer says, it is just as when an earthquake has come and has broken up what formerly was one continuous mass. You see the parts are diverse, but you see that they formerly were a unity.
So we don't take for granted this modern knowledge that our ancestors did not have 7 or 8 years, generations ago rather. Next time he takes up the Table of the Nations in Genesis chapter 10, one of the most unique documents of antiquity. We'll put in a link this time to F.W. Farrer, that great Anglican clergyman, chaplain to Queen Victoria. He did much on science and scripture and theology and Bible commentaries in his brief life. We did a video on his take on science and scripture, so we'll put the link to that. See you soon.
Okay, bye.